Hello everybody. This is an instructional module on memoing, and this is just a follow-up to some of the other conversations that we've had about memoing. It struck me that looking through the different memos that I needed to become a little more precise, as well as talk explicitly what are some of the elements of memos. Let me accentuate that memos, as Charmis says, have different purposes, and what you're seeing in the memo that I'm sharing with you presently is a memo that's off of a field note of one mayor that essentially is taking the local control coding and category and trying to develop that and understand what that means. And let me walk through this. If you haven't had the chance to look through the memo, what you want to do is just read the whole, stop and read the whole thing now. And so that will just give you an overview. And what I want to do is I'm going to talk through these different comments / points just to talk about what's happening in this memo. And again, the objective here is actually taking this memo and data and trying to compare it to other comments to other mayors and other data points is part of this constant comparison process, right? So it's actually working to integrate data and memos in a way so that I can bolster this local control construct if it has such salience within my analysis. So again, if you haven't read through the whole memo, go ahead and please do that. So let me start. First of all, comment box 1. One of the things I wanted to point out here as in point 1 is that you'll notice that what I'm foregrounding here is the conceptual, the categorical. That's important because you want to keep in mind that what you're doing in grounded theory is moving out towards a theoretical construct that has some density to it, help to understand texture, conditions, and some of those other pieces. And so what point 1 is trying to do is kind of identify this local control piece as a framework. So when we say local control, how do I want readers to think about this? Is it, there's different ways you can think about local control. It could be an ideology, it could be a framework, it could be a discourse. Here I'm trying to work through some clarity as to what exactly it is. You always hear people who work with me know this comment very familiar. It's a very familiar comment on my end when I say, what is this an example of? I'm pointing to data, and this is kind of what this is suggesting. Point 2 equally is trying to do the same thing. Here is an example of still setting in motion in this memo. What are the theoretical conceptual pieces? Because we're talking about the idea of governance organizations and what the participant, the interviewee I should say, interviewee provides us is purview into the way that these governance organizations interact in a way that there's impasse. That is what I'm trying to set up. What do we know? What is being presented to us about these governance organizations, as well as the relationships between them? And this is a theoretical way of still trying to provide some texture to what do I mean by these governance organizations? What are the relationships to them? How do they interact? Anytime you have data, and this is moving to point 3. Point 3 is trying to show the way that data has to be set up. Any data excerpt that you are trying to show that's going to demonstrate a particular element or a point of your data has to set up what you want your readers to see, and help your readers understand what this is an example of, tied to your theoretical framework. So you notice how governmental organizations pops up in this as a staging mechanism. Staging mechanisms are important because staging mechanisms point to your units of analysis, right? So units of analysis become important to help your readers understand what to follow in the excerpt that you're going to jump them into. Without this kind of stage work, of an excerpt your readers are reading, and you're hoping that they land to the same conclusion or focus on the same elements that you wanted them to, but you have no guarantees without the stage work. So the stage work is awfully important, and this is what you're seeing taking place at point 3. Now, in providing data, data has to have, and this is where point 4 comes into play, is data in itself has multiple interpretations. Your job as the analyst is to help pick apart that data and help us understand what we're seeing. Point 4 is demonstrating how the data is picked apart. Key pieces that are in what is said have to be foregrounded and put into some kind of analytical relationships through your discussion of these particular data that you're presenting. And let me put this in a different way. If you were presenting data as a presentation, you would talk your readers or your audience through what you're seeing in this data and what it exemplifies. That's what your analysis should do, and that's what point 4 is trying to demonstrate. This has to be clear. This is incredibly important for your readers to be able to understand how you are seeing this data. And this has to help solidify the key point about the units of analysis and how you're thinking about these units of analysis and how they function, or it has to correspond, might be the better word. So if you're saying that this is about governmental organizations or a particular, I'm going to use an example that we've talked about, a mode of leadership, say, and you're trying to use this as a way of thinking about a particular strand of leadership, you need to help us understand what here in that quote, in that excerpt is demonstrating this particular type of leadership that you are pointing to. If you haven't spelled it out and shown us how this functions and what kinds of relationships get mobilized through the activity, if it's an observation, or the statements, if it's an interview, then your readers aren't going to be able to follow you. Point 5 is important just from the point of view that point 5 is trying to demonstrate that sometimes you're going to have points, questions to emerge, as well as tasks that you need to follow up on. And one of the pieces that I've suggested in many of your excerpts, and I should say memos, is that your engagement with literature happens later in different kinds of memos. And at this particular junction, in this particular memo, everything is very much closely tied to the data. I'm not going to spend the time to tie together how this corresponds to other literatures, just because what I'm trying to do is unpack the data and move towards a theoretical construct that helps frame what I'm seeing, what I'm analyzing. So you can make notes that become pieces for you to come back to. Again, point number 6 is important just from the point of view that this puts into place the analysis, right? Here, if you have excerpts and you're pointing to particular excerpts or quotations, you need to tell us what is important about those excerpts. What do they demonstrate? What do they exemplify? And that kind of analysis is crucial. Equally, if you go just above that excerpt that I provide above point 6, comment box 6, you notice that stage work is also in place just to help orient my readers. Point 7, again, is trying to break up the idea or solidify this particular piece about the staging and theoretical work, right? Theoretical work and staging go hand in hand. The theoretical work is a way that you're actually putting into place theoretical element and how it speaks to your thinking about the unit of analysis. And the staging is a representational pattern practice that helps your readers grab onto what you want them to grab onto. So that wraps up this short module on memos. As I indicated, you are moving towards integrating memos. This would be what I would take and put into motion to another set of data and or other memo that I may have. The objective again is trying to move towards conceptual density as well as clarity between different conceptual units and how they relate to each other. Local control has to pertain to something that I am asking as part of my initial research questions. If it doesn't come into play to some degree with that, then I have to make some decisions as a researcher as to what I do with it. Does it actually come into the manuscript as a point of analysis? If it's not a central focus that I identified as part of my research questions, then I have to determine whether it's a secondary topic, secondary theme of analysis that gets relegated to another manuscript at another time. Hope this helps.